When Rachel's grandmother passed away, she left Rachel a generous inheritance, a gift meant to change her life. But Rachel's parents didn't see it that way. They were convinced she'd waste every penny, calling her irresponsible and clueless. They threatened to cut her off for good if she didn't obey their demands. Rachel stood there, heart pounding, realizing she had to choose, follow their rules, or risk everything on her own. She took a breath, clenched her fists, and decided she'd prove them wrong no matter the cost. If you've ever been told you'd fail before you even tried, this story is for you. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you believe in second chances and the courage to follow your dreams. Rachel Parker was 30 years old, with a quiet confidence that most people tended to underestimate. She had warm hazel eyes that seemed to sparkle when she laughed, and a cascade of honey brown hair that framed her gentle face. Standing 5'6", Rachel had always carried herself with a subtle grace, moving through the world as if she were constantly observing, constantly thinking. Some called her a dreamer, and maybe she was. But Rachel believed that dreams were just plans you hadn't finished yet. She lived in a modest apartment on the east side of Portland, Oregon, surrounded by stacks of books about architecture, sustainability, and urban planning. Rachel had always been fascinated by how cities grew and changed how people built homes and lives within them. Ever since she was a kid, she'd drawn sketches of tiny homes and eco-villages, hoping one day she could help make neighborhoods more affordable and greener for everyone. But her parents never saw the point in Rachel's passion. Her father, Charles, was a hard-nosed corporate lawyer who'd built his life around rules and tradition. He liked control. Her mother, Diane, a retired teacher, was practical and careful, believing every dollar should be accounted for and nothing left to chance. To them, Rachel was the family wild card, talented, yes, but also too soft, too trusting, and far too likely to get taken advantage of. That tension had been there for years, simmering just under the surface. Rachel tried to keep the peace to nod along during family dinners when her father droned on about financial responsibility, or when her mother complained that artistic dreams don't pay the bills. Then, everything changed. Rachel's grandmother, Margaret Parker, passed away unexpectedly after a short illness. Margaret had been the only person who truly believed in Rachel's dreams. She'd nurtured Rachel's creativity since she was little, encouraging her to draw, to learn to think big. Margaret had been a quiet champion in a family obsessed with caution. When the will was read, Rachel was shocked. Margaret had left her a substantial inheritance, $450,000, enough money to change Rachel's life forever. Rachel nearly fell out of her chair when she heard the amount. It felt like a blessing straight from her grandmother's heart, a way of saying, "Don't let them stop you." Of course, Rachel's parents saw it differently. The moment they learned about the inheritance, they swooped in with all their opinions, telling her exactly how she should invest it, who she should consult, what financial advisor she should hire. Her father went so far as to bring over pamphlets for annuities and high-yield bonds, talking about protecting the principal like he was safeguarding a nuclear code. Rachel tried to reason with them. She explained her dream to invest in green housing projects, maybe buy a piece of land, and work with local communities to build affordable, eco-friendly homes. She had been researching for years, putting together plans, learning from experts, even volunteering on Habitat for Humanity builds. This money could finally help her get started. But Charles and Diane couldn't hear any of it. To them, Rachel's plan was reckless, a surefire way to lose everything. "Rachel, you've never run a business," her father barked over coffee one afternoon. "You'll burn through that inheritance in 6 months and come crawling back broke." Her mother chimed in, "Sweetheart, we're only trying to protect you. That money should go into a safe investment. We know what's best." Rachel felt her throat tighten, heat flushing her cheeks. Part of her wanted to scream, to list all the reasons they were wrong, but she knew it was useless. They had made up their minds. After that conversation, Rachel couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying her parents' warnings over and over. Was she truly that naive? Was she really going to blow through her grandmother's gift? Then she remembered the way Margaret used to look at her drawings, eyes shining with pride. "You were born to build something beautiful," her grandmother once told her. Rachel took a deep breath. No, she wasn't going to let fear rule her life. She decided to trust herself, even if no one else would. Over the next few days, Rachel began reaching out to contacts she'd met through sustainability groups, talking to urban planners, meeting with local community organizers. Her mind buzzed with excitement as she started sketching possible projects, running financial models, and carefully calculating risks. Meanwhile, her parents kept pressing her. Every phone call turned into a lecture. Every family gathering ended with tension thick enough to cut with a knife. It was as if they'd already decided she was a failure before she'd even begun. Still, Rachel refused to give up. Somewhere, deep down, she knew she'd never forgive herself if she handed over her dreams just to please them. She would do this for herself and for Margaret. She'd prove them all wrong. At first, Rachel thought maybe, just maybe, her parents would calm down if they saw her taking careful steps. She showed them spreadsheets, lists of vetted contractors, even feasibility studies from trusted consultants. She thought proof would ease their worries, but it only made them dig in harder. Charles, her father, refused to even look at her files. "Those are just dreams on paper, Rachel," he snapped one evening. "Paper means nothing when the market crashes." Diane, her mother, clutched Rachel's hand as if trying to rescue her from a burning building. "Please, honey, don't do this. You are throwing away everything your grandmother worked for." It hurt Rachel more than she could admit. Their lack of faith sliced through her confidence like a cold blade. She had always known her parents were cautious, but this was something worse. This was rejection of her very soul, her vision, everything she had been working for. The worst was when her parents tried to bring the rest of the family into it. They called Aunt Joni in Seattle, Uncle Tim in California, even cousins Rachel barely spoke to. Suddenly, Rachel was getting phone calls every day, filled with pity or scolding, telling her to come to her senses before she destroyed the family name. One night, she answered a call from her cousin Eric, who had always been the family golden boy. "Rachel, you need to listen to your dad," he said, in that smug, patronizing tone. "He knows what he's doing. You've never handled this kind of money." Rachel bit her tongue so hard she tasted blood. It seemed like the entire family was rallying against her, a united front convinced she would fail. Even her younger brother Michael, who had always been on her side, texted her, "Sis, maybe you should listen to them this time." Alone in her apartment, Rachel felt like the walls were closing in. Every phone call chipped away at her, every text message another stone thrown at her fragile dream. The inheritance, which had once felt like a beautiful blessing, was quickly becoming a curse. One Sunday, her parents showed up unannounced at her apartment. Rachel's heart sank as she opened the door and saw their tight, worried faces. Her father didn't even say hello before launching into his speech. "Rachel, this is the last time I'm going to say it. If you don't agree to put that money into the trust we've set up, you will no longer be welcome in this family." Her mother, wiping tears, added, "We love you, Rachel, but you're forcing us to choose between your recklessness and protecting the family." Rachel felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "You're going to disown me over this," she whispered, voice cracking. Her father's eyes were cold, steely. You're leaving us no choice." For a moment, Rachel thought she might break down, that the fear might finally win. But then something inside her steadied. It was as if Margaret herself was standing behind her whispering, "You were born to build." Rachel drew a deep breath and stood taller. "I'm sorry you feel that way," she said quietly, "but I'm not giving up my dream." Her parents left without another word. The door clicked shut with a finality that made Rachel's knees tremble. The days that followed were some of the loneliest of her life. No more Sunday dinners. No more casual chats. Her parents cut off all communication, and soon the rest of the family followed. Invitations to birthday parties, baby showers, even holidays, all gone. Rachel tried to bury herself in her work, but the silence was deafening. Even walking through the grocery store felt heavy, as if everyone around her could see her, shame her isolation. One night, after another long day of research and calls with contractors, Rachel sat on her couch, hands trembling. She scrolled through old photos on her phone, birthdays, vacations, Thanksgiving dinners with her parents, smiling proudly. A painful lump formed in her throat. Was it really worth losing them? She almost caved, almost picked up the phone to apologize, to promise she'd do exactly what they wanted. But then she looked around her apartment, saw the stacks of plans and designs she had spent years perfecting, and felt the spark again. Margaret had believed in her. Rachel needed to believe in herself too. The next morning, she doubled down. She signed preliminary agreements with 2 development partners specializing in sustainable housing. She made a down payment on a parcel of land near a revitalizing neighborhood, a place crying out for affordable green housing. Word got back to her parents within days, and the backlash was immediate. Another round of scathing emails, this time accusing her of destroying the family's reputation of being ungrateful and arrogant. Rachel read every word, letting the pain wash over her, and then let it go. She was done trying to please people who refused to see her heart. In that moment, Rachel realized she had crossed a line. There would be no going back. She had chosen her dream over their approval, and she would stand by that choice no matter what came next. Rachel threw herself into the project with a determination that surprised even her. Each morning, she rose before sunrise, checking blueprints, scheduling calls with city inspectors, meeting with contractors, chasing down permits. She had never worked so hard, nor felt so alive. But the price was steep. The silence from her parents was crushing. She would sometimes glance at her phone, half hoping to see a simple text, "We're proud of you." But there was nothing, only the void where her family had once been. Holidays came and went without a single invitation. She saw photos online of Thanksgiving dinners, birthdays, weddings, all without her. Worse word spread through the extended family, and the whispers began. At a cousin's wedding, she tried to attend. People shot her pitying looks and muttered under their breath about how she was burning grandma's money on foolish dreams. Rachel left early that night, blinking away tears, hiding in her car so no one would see her cry. Meanwhile, the business had its own brutal lessons. The land purchase was more complicated than she expected. Environmental surveys revealed drainage problems that delayed the project for weeks, and city regulators piled on fees and inspections. Rachel had to scramble to renegotiate contracts, begging the sellers not to back out. The money felt like it was vanishing overnight. Rachel found herself lying awake, calculating numbers over and over, terrified she would lose everything. The inheritance had been her lifeline. If she failed now, it would confirm every terrible thing her parents had predicted. Her stress began to show. She lost weight, barely eating. The spark in her eyes dimmed, replaced by deep shadows of exhaustion. Sometimes she'd catch herself staring at a wall, unable to move, paralyzed by doubt. Then came the sabotage. One morning, Rachel arrived at the construction site to find graffiti scrawled across the temporary fencing, "You're destroying your family." At first, she was sure it was random vandalism. But later that week, she overheard a subcontractor on the phone apparently talking to her father. Charles had been reaching out, trying to sway workers to abandon the project, telling them Rachel was incompetent and would ruin their reputation. The betrayal burned through her chest like acid. Her own father, her flesh and blood, trying to sabotage her dreams behind her back. Rachel confronted him, voice shaking. "Why are you doing this to me?" Charles didn't flinch. "I'm saving you from yourself, Rachel. If you can't see that, then you're a bigger fool than I thought." She slammed the phone down and screamed into her empty apartment, the rage tearing through her like a hurricane. She had never felt so alone, so abandoned, so heartbroken. And yet, through the wreckage of her emotions, something hardened. If no one would believe in her, she would believe in herself even more fiercely. The following weeks pushed Rachel to her absolute limits. She faced delays, budget overruns, angry neighbors, and harsh media stories, painting her as a rich girl with a fantasy project. Sometimes she wondered if they were right. One night, after a city inspector delayed her permits yet again, Rachel fell apart. She curled up on the concrete floor of the unfinished building, sobbing into her hands. What if they're right? What if I'm just a fool? What if I'm killing Grandma's legacy? She felt Margaret's voice in her heart, as clear as if her grandmother stood beside her. Dreams matter, Rachel. Don't give up. Rachel wiped her tears, stood up, and forced herself to keep going. She hired a new project manager with experience in community housing, someone who believed in her mission. Together, they cleaned up the problems, restructured contracts, and brought in fresh investment partners who saw the project's potential. Slowly, painfully, Rachel clawed her way forward. But the wounds ran deep. Her parents still refused to speak to her. The family still called her a traitor, a disappointment. Rumors kept swirling that she was bankrupt, that she was mentally unstable, that she was wasting her grandmother's money out of spite. Rachel tried to tune them out, but every time she closed her eyes, she heard their voices. Failure, ungrateful, foolish. They echoed like poison through her mind until some nights she would sit awake at 3 a.m., clutching a cup of cold coffee, wondering if maybe she really was as worthless as they said. Still, she refused to quit. Brick by brick, permit by permit. Rachel's dream was taking shape. A small community of 10 affordable, energy-efficient homes was rising from the ground. Seeing the frames go up gave her a tiny spark of hope, like a candle flickering in the dark. But she knew the fight wasn't over. There was still so much that could go wrong, so many people waiting for her to fail. And that knowledge cut deeper than any wound. Just when Rachel thought she'd survived the worst, another crisis hit. The week before the first homes were scheduled to open for inspection, the bank called. A clerical error on the loan paperwork had triggered a review that froze her construction funds. Workers couldn't get paid. Supplies were delayed. Subcontractors threatened to walk off the job. Rachel felt like she'd been punched in the gut. She tried to reason with the loan officer, showing them every receipt, every permit. But the faceless bureaucracy didn't care. They quoted procedures and policies, their voices flat and indifferent. For 2 sleepless nights, Rachel called everyone she could think of fighting to keep the project alive. On the 3rd night, she broke down crying on the phone to the project manager. Maybe they were right, she choked out. Maybe I'm in over my head. But the project manager refused to let her spiral. Rachel, you've come too far to back down now, he told her, steady and calm. You built this, no one else. We'll get through it. His words steadied her. Rachel forced herself to stand up and keep moving. She pulled in favors, called every bank contact, and finally convinced a senior loan officer to expedite the review. Within 48 hours, the funds were unfrozen, just in time to pay the workers before they walked away. But the stress was relentless. She lost 10 pounds. Her hair thinned. Friends who didn't understand why she kept pushing told her to just sell the land and walk away. One of her best friends even accused her of being obsessed and destroying herself for pride. Rachel wondered if they were right. Was this pride, or was it survival? Every night, she crawled into bed, too exhausted to dream. And every morning, she woke up to another round of challenges. The plumbing failed inspection. The solar panels were delayed by a shipping strike. Even the weather seemed against her, with a freak spring hailstorm flooding parts of the site and damaging supplies. And through it all, her parents' silence remained. Not a word. Not even to ask if she was okay. One evening, after a 14-hour day of frantic repairs, Rachel stood alone on the empty lot. The sun was setting, painting the steel frames of the homes in a fiery orange light. She stared at them, exhausted, shaking, half broken. "Am I strong enough?" she whispered to the sky. A memory rose from deep inside, a summer day when she was 8 years old, building a crooked little dollhouse with her grandmother. Margaret had smiled and said, "Don't worry about making it perfect, honey. Worry about making it yours." Rachel took a deep breath. "This is mine," she told herself, "perfect or not." So she kept going. When the next morning brought another setback, a contractor trying to triple his price, Rachel stared him down, called his bluff, and threatened legal action. For the first time, she realized she wasn't afraid anymore. She was tired. Yes, bone-deep tired, but no longer scared. The contractor backed off. Piece by piece, she solved the problems. She organized volunteers from the community to help clean up storm damage. She negotiated better rates with a local supplier after explaining the affordable housing mission. Slowly, against every obstacle, the neighborhood began to take shape. 10 homes built for families who never dreamed they could own one. 10 homes with solar roofs, recycled materials, and open green spaces for kids to play. The day the final inspection passed, Rachel stood there alone, keys in her pocket, tears streaming down her cheeks. It wasn't just wood and steel and paint. It was proof. Proof that she could do it. Proof that they had been wrong. But even in that triumph, a dull ache remained. Her parents didn't come to see it. They didn't send a card, a call, a single word. Rachel realized painfully that she might have to live with that loss forever. But standing in front of the finished homes, seeing children run across the fresh grass, hearing parents laugh in the courtyard, Rachel knew one thing for sure: it had been worth it. Rachel could have walked away right then, satisfied that she'd proven herself, even if her parents never saw it. But something deeper stirred inside her, a quiet fire that refused to die. They hadn't just doubted her. They'd actively tried to sabotage her. They'd belittled her dreams, torn apart her confidence, and turned her own family against her. No, she wouldn't let that be the end of the story. She decided to make them see exactly what she had built on her terms. First, she put together a detailed project report. The profit margins, the resale values, the environmental certifications, the waiting list of eager buyers. She made sure it was polished, professional, impossible to dismiss. Then she sent a single email to her parents, attaching the entire file with the subject line, "I thought you might want to know." No pleading, no apology, just the truth laid out in black and white. Days passed with no reply. Until one afternoon, Rachel's phone rang. It was her father. For a moment, she considered letting it go to voicemail, but then she answered. Charles's voice was thin, almost hesitant. "Rachel, we got your report." Rachel stayed silent, waiting. Her father cleared his throat. "I didn't realize how thorough you'd been." A tight knot formed in Rachel's chest, but she kept her tone calm. "I've been working nonstop for 2 years, Dad. I know what I'm doing." A pause. Then he sighed, and Rachel could almost hear the walls in his voice crumbling. "I suppose we misjudged you." Rachel exhaled a long, cleansing breath. That night, she received a short email from her mother, simply saying, "We're proud of you." Rachel read those 4 words again and again, tears streaming down her cheeks. It didn't erase the pain, but it was a start. And karma. Karma arrived the day a feature article about Rachel's project landed on the cover of Forbes magazine. The headline was bold and undeniable. A green visionary turns $450,000 inheritance into a $10 million affordable housing empire. Requests for interviews poured in. Investors wanted to meet her. Other cities invited her to consult on sustainable building. Suddenly, the same people who had called her a naive dreamer were begging for her advice. Rachel stepped onto that stage at a national architecture conference, looking out at a sea of applause, and for the first time truly felt free. She no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. In the following months, Rachel used her new platform to launch an education program for young women, helping them learn business skills and sustainable design. She refused to let her parents' past cruelty harden her. Instead, she turned it into fuel to uplift others. And while her parents tried awkwardly to reconnect, Rachel kept healthy boundaries. She visited them on holidays, but refused to let them manage her decisions ever again. They could see her success, but they would never again control it. The final act of karma came when Rachel was invited to a state leadership forum where city officials praised her as a model of community-focused innovation. Her parents sat quietly in the front row, invited as guests. Rachel stepped on stage, smiled at them, and spoke clearly into the microphone. "Money never taught me to dream, but my dreams taught me how to use money." The applause was thunderous. Charles and Diane exchanged a glance, humbled and speechless. Rachel looked at them, smiled gently, and turned away, stepping forward into her future, powerful, confident, and unbreakable. Years later, Rachel stood in the heart of the thriving community she had built. 10 green, energy-efficient homes had become 50, then 100, and now a nationwide movement. Parents played with their children on shared green lawns. Neighbors gathered in community gardens Rachel had designed herself. The laughter and joy were everything she had once dreamed of. She walked through the rows of solar-powered homes, breathing in the smell of fresh-cut grass, hearing the sounds of children riding bikes, families sharing stories on their porches. It felt like magic, but magic made real through grit, courage, and love. Her parents had slowly come back into her life. They never fully apologized for all the hurt, but in small ways, they showed they had learned. Charles helped fund one of Rachel's new scholarship programs. Diane began volunteering at the community library Rachel built. There were still scars, but Rachel chose to let those scars remind her how far she had come. Standing in front of the first house she'd ever built, Rachel paused. She ran her hand along the siding, remembering the fear, the loneliness, the rage, and the moment she decided to rise anyway. A little girl ran past her laughing, chasing a puppy, and Rachel's heart swelled. This was what Margaret would have wanted. She closed her eyes for a moment, imagining her grandmother smiling proudly. Then she opened them with a confidence that could never be taken away. Rachel turned back toward the new community center, where a class of young girls waited to learn how to design their own sustainable homes. She smiled, stepped forward, and whispered to herself, "Dreams don't just build houses, they build hope." And with that, she walked on, ready to help the next dreamer rise.